For years, perhaps your entire life, you were led to believe that death is the end, the final period, the ultimate blackout. But what if I told you that none of that is real? That your consciousness not only continues after death, but, in fact, it was never limited to a single lifetime. What you will discover in this video is neither self-help theory nor mystical delusion. These are teachings revealed by Seth and channeled by Jane Roberts, known as the Seth Material, one of the deepest and most respected bodies of work on the true nature of the soul. A knowledge studied at universities like Yale and seriously researched within the fields of consciousness and metaphysics. Today, I will show you why you never truly began to exist, and, consequently, why you can never truly die. I will reveal how your soul navigates multiple simultaneous existences, how it chooses the experiences it lives, and, most astonishingly, how you can access this information even in this life to heal blockages, understand fears, and transform your reality right now. If you have the courage to stay with me until the end of this video, be prepared. The way you understand your own existence will never be the same. Most people, for as long as they can remember, carry an almost instinctive fear of death, as if it were a final wall, a finish line with no return. But what if I told you, with all the calmness of someone who has wandered these consciousness labyrinths for a long time, that death is nothing more than an illusion? Yes, my friend, what we call the end is merely a shift in focus. It's like switching off one camera and turning on another in a different room, in another setting. Your consciousness, that living spark you carry, is not interrupted. It only adjusts its point of attention to another vibrational field. Imagine yourself on a plane. When it passes through dense clouds, you lose sight of the blue sky, but you know the sky is still there. Death works in the same way. Seth teaches us that when we traverse this cloud called death, we simply change vibrational frequency. We remain lucid, alert, and even more awakened than we are now because physical limitations cease. It's like taking off a tight outfit at the end of the day. The relief is immediate. And the most curious part? Many describe this transition as one of the smoothest experiences they have ever had. Now, for someone conditioned from an early age to fear the nothingness, this sounds almost absurd. But notice, even during sleep, when we momentarily lose the notion of the physical body, we continue experiencing dreams, sensations, encounters. Sleep is, on a small scale, a preview of what the death transition represents, a change of focus, not annihilation. By the way, have you ever stopped to wonder why so many ancient traditions call death the Great Sleep? There is a deep wisdom in that parallel, and there's something even more interesting. When we leave the body, our consciousness expands in scope. Without the filters of matter, we understand with clarity everything that once seemed confusing. Resentments lose importance, dramas dissolve, and a greater understanding of the journey emerges. Many report reunions with loved ones, life reviews, and even a kind of soul school where we study the lessons of the just completed existence. There are no courts of condemnation, only rooms of understanding. But of course, this is only the beginning of our conversation. Because, see, if death is not the closure, then what happens to the soul after this transition? How does it continue its journey? And, most importantly, where does this almost magical capacity to exist in so many places at once come from? That's where the next point begins to reveal one of the most fascinating secrets about the true nature of the soul. Most of us were taught to think of the soul as a straight line: born, live, die, maybe restart. But that view is, at best, a childish simplification. The truth, as Seth so brilliantly reveals, is far more audacious. The soul is a multidimensional explorer. It does not follow an organized queue of experiences. It dances on multiple stages at once, inhabiting various bodies, times, and spaces, all at the same time. It's as if your consciousness were a vast puzzle in which each piece lives its own scene, but all belong to the same whole. Think, for example, of an author writing several different books simultaneously. Each story has its own characters, plots, and settings, yet all bear the signature of that same writer. That is how the soul operates. It creates versions of itself in multiple realities, some very similar to yours, others completely exotic that your current mind could not even conceive. And while one of those versions may be living an ordinary daily life, another may be navigating cosmic or spiritual experiences in civilizations we don't even know. And consider this, it explains those strange feelings of déjà vu, sudden intuitions, or innate talents that seem to arise out of nowhere. Often they are echoes from your other versions feeding your current path. A practical example? Someone who never studied music but has an innate ability to compose and play. Perhaps, in another lifeline, they are a great musician, and what surfaces here is a leak of skills shared across dimensions. That's why, when we talk about evolution, we must abandon the single-line idea and embrace the concept of expansion. Your soul is not walking forward. It is expanding in all directions like a tree sending its branches everywhere. And on each branch, there is a different you experiencing varied aspects of creation. While you live this life now, other versions of you are learning completely different lessons, all contributing to the growth of the same central core. And if this already surprises you, wait until we understand the real reason your soul chooses these journeys. Because unlike what many believe, reincarnation is not punitive. There is a far more loving and intelligent logic behind this choice. For a long time, we were taught to see reincarnation as some cosmic prison. You made a mistake here, you pay there, you did wrong, you come back to suffer. But Seth's vision turns all of that upside down. Reincarnation is not an automatic punishment. It is a creative choice of the soul itself. Yes, a choice. Before each life, the soul, with a broad vision our conscious mind cannot imagine, decides the scenarios, the people, the difficulties, and the opportunities that will best serve its growth. It's like planning an expedition. It knows exactly which terrains to explore in order to become wiser. Now, realize how liberating that is. We're not here to be punished. We're here to fulfill learning agreement. That person born into great challenges, be it health issues, emotional struggles, or significant losses, is not being punished, but is experiencing deep lessons they themselves chose to expand their understanding of existence. These are practical lessons, and each one carries precious growth seeds. For example, someone who spends their life dealing with abandonment may actually be learning about self-love and autonomy. Someone facing great financial challenges may be training resilience and creativity in scarcity. Seth teaches us that each life configuration is a carefully structured laboratory for developing specific emotional, spiritual, and vibrational skills. And the curious thing is that often what seems like an obstacle is the fastest path to advancement. This perspective also dismantles the idea of punitive karma. There is no cosmic judge with a clipboard tracking your failures. There is, instead, a loving field of self-correction where the soul, always free, chooses experiences to understand the consequences of its own choices in other lives. In other words, suffering is not a tax. It is a profound opportunity for consciousness. And even when pain is intense, it is always embedded in a larger learning context. But now pay attention, because there is an even more fascinating layer. While you are here, conscious of this life, there are other versions of you in other timelines living parallel learnings, and what happens to them affects you too. Get ready, because from here on, the existence game is about to get even more surprising. Now hold on tight, because this is where the veil of reality truly begins to lift. Seth takes us to a level of understanding few have the courage to face. At this very moment, as you hear these words, there are other versions of you living other lives in different times and spaces, simultaneously. These are not past or future reincarnations. They are simultaneous existences. All these personalities share the same core. Your soul, or as Seth calls it, your oversoul. It's like an orchestra playing multiple melodies at once. Each instrument has its own score, yet together they form a single symphony. Some of these versions may be living human experiences in different cultures or centuries. The soul, in its creative essence, loves to experiment with all the possibilities the universe offers. It is not content with a single perspective, because every angle enriches its cosmic repertoire. Perhaps that explains why sometimes you feel inexplicable affinities for places, languages, or cultures you have never known, or why certain talents spring within you so naturally as if they were already complete. It may be the reflection of another version of you sharing its learning in subtle ways. A person with an extraordinary gift for languages, for example, may be unconsciously connecting to a parallel personality that is a polyglot in another lifeline. Seth explains there is a constant exchange between these personalities, not a rational exchange like we have with words, but a vibrational transmission of experiences and insights. Even without realizing it, you have been countless times benefited by the learnings of your other version, and the reverse is also true. The choices and triumphs you live here now also feed the expansion of those other personalities. And if this idea is already scrambling your mind a bit, stay calm, because now comes one of the most beautiful parts of this whole mechanism: the way the soul gathers, organizes, and integrates all these simultaneous learnings. And what happens right after the so-called death will show you how all of this makes a much greater sense than we ever imagined. Now we reach a part that almost no one speaks about clearly. What happens to everything you have lived? Your emotions, your choices, your mistakes, your successes? Does it simply vanish? And the answer is no, absolutely not. According to Seth, upon crossing the physical death threshold, the soul begins a magnificent integration process. It's as if it enters a great review hall where every detail of the just-lived life is contemplated with full lucidity, but without the emotional weight we carry while incarnated. Imagine a film editor reviewing a complete movie, scene by scene, observing not only what happened, but the reason behind each decision. In that state, the soul does not judge itself with guilt or shame. It observes with loving understanding, almost like a professor evaluating a research project. Even those situations you deemed unforgivable mistakes gain a new perspective, revealing themselves as valuable experiences within the evolution laboratory. This integration process does not erase experiences. On the contrary, it enriches them. Every emotion felt, every lesson learned, every relationship built is absorbed and stored in the soul's larger field, which Seth describes as a vast ocean of accumulated consciousness. And that is why some people, even in life, possess that old soul wisdom. They carry resonances of various prior integrations, which makes certain lessons come more refined from an early age. A practical example: someone who, still young, demonstrates compassion, maturity, and an impressive capacity to forgive. They have already gone through numerous life reviews, and the wisdom accumulated in those integrations begins to overflow into their current experience. Books like Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss illustrate these spontaneous wisdom recoveries that some souls begin accessing even during their present incarnation. But the most extraordinary part is what comes next. Because if all this baggage of simultaneous lives is integrated, it can also be accessed while we are still physically alive. There is a path, often intuitive, to connect with these transgenerational memories and accelerate our expansion. And that is exactly where we go now. And here we begin to touch on one of the most practical and fascinating aspects of all this knowledge: accessing other lives while still incarnated. Seth explains that memories of other existences are not lost or locked away in some inaccessible vault. They are here now, circulating in your own psyche. Many of your intuitions, unexplained fears, or innate abilities are, in fact, echoes of experiences already lived by your other version. The soul shares these fragments as evolutionary shortcuts. Think of those people with an impressive facility to learn certain things, like playing an instrument, speaking a language, or even grasping complex philosophies from an early age. In many cases, these are reflections of learnings that have already occurred in other lifelines. It's as if the soul says, "You have already mastered this before, so you can use it again now." Likewise, Certain irrational fears, like fear of heights, water, or crowds, may be remnants of unresolved events in parallel existences. And how does this happen? There are therapeutic techniques developed precisely to help in this deep dive. Deep memory regression, conscious hypnosis, and structured expanded meditation processes are powerful tools in this regard. We are not talking about mystical fortune-telling, but well-studied methods. Serious researchers like Michael Newton and Brian Weiss have mapped, over decades of clinical work, thousands of consistent accounts of people accessing these interlife memories. They not only relive scenes from other existences, but also understand how certain current fears, emotional patterns, and even physical blockages are rooted in experiences from other timelines. But it is not strictly necessary to resort to formal therapies to begin this contact. The soul speaks all the time. It sends intuition, sensations, sudden impression, and above all, dreams. Many recurring or highly symbolic dreams are fragments of those other existences trying to be integrated. Lucid dreams, for example, are privileged portals for working on this contact. With training, you can navigate these states without losing lucidity and bring precious information upon waking. There are also more accessible self-exploration practices anyone can start applying. Intuitive journaling, where you write freely the answers your soul delivers. Daily contemplative meditation, where in silence you lovingly ask, "What does my soul wish to reveal to me today?" And supervised automatic writing exercises, when done with proper preparation and balance. All these practices gradually train the conscious mind to perceive signals that were always there, but overshadowed by daily noise. Naturally, this process demands responsibility and emotional maturity. It is not a curiosity game, but a sacred dialogue with your own essence. Therefore, whenever possible, it is advisable to be accompanied by experienced and ethical professionals in the initial phases of this journey. Over time, however, you will realize that true mastery is not in discovering the past, but in understanding why all of this is happening. And that is precisely the central question leading us to the next and deepest level of existence. What, after all, is the great purpose behind so many lives, so many stories, and so many dimensions? For centuries, many believed life was a kind of test, a trial where mistakes would be punished and successes rewarded. This moralistic view created a real existential burden for billions of people. But Seth reveals something vastly more liberating and elegant. The soul did not come here to be approved. It came to discover itself. Existence is not a penance. It is a grand exploration of consciousness's own creativity. The soul, in its essence, is like a curious child in an infinite field of possibilities. It wants to experience, feel, create, and expand its own perception. Each life, each incarnation, is like a new story it chooses to live, to access different facets of itself. Just as an artist paints dozens of canvases without one nullifying or correcting the other, the soul creates multiple existences, not to fix anything, but to express itself in varied facets of creation. That is why you can observe such diversity in human trajectories. While some live peaceful and abundant lives, others incarnate heavy challenges, losses, illnesses, or complex dilemmas. None of this is punishment. Each scenario represents a unique combination of experiences the soul wants to live. Sometimes it chooses to explore the joy of creation. Other times, the deep lesson that only contrast provides, such as compassion, forgiveness, resilience, detachment, and humility. But here is something even more delicate. Suffering is not mandatory. Pain is not a prerequisite for evolution. There are souls that tread lifelines practically dedicated to the pleasure of beauty, art, or spiritual contemplation. Suffering only arises when certain lessons require contrast to be assimilated. For example, one only truly understands freedom after feeling the weight of limitation, only understands generosity after facing deprivation. Thus, each experience is a divinely intelligent laboratory of perception. When you begin to understand this, the fear of making mistakes disappears. Because there is no definitive failure, there is only expansion of consciousness. Every decision you make, every emotion you feel, every choice you face, compose a vast mosaic of learning your soul is absorbing. And these experiences do not serve only you now. They serve the whole of all your simultaneous existences, which are permanently feeding each other. And perhaps the most impactful thing of all, you never die. What you call I is just one of your soul's momentary expressions, a living piece within a vastly larger and more sophisticated cosmic organism. When one life ends, another is already in full bloom. Your consciousness is continuous. You merely change form, setting, and story. The more you begin to remember this truth, even while incarnated, the more you live with freedom, purpose, and inner peace. But my friend, even with all this, we have only just begun to touch the veil of an infinitely vaster reality. There are dimensions, levels, and greater intelligences that you will one day access as well. Because in the grand adventure of the soul, there is no end. There is only movement, dance, and eternal creation. Now that you know the true nature of your soul, answer me honestly. What still prevents you from living with the lightness of knowing you will never die? All these fears, angsts, blockages, they exist only because you were conditioned to believe in limitation. But now that the veil has been lifted, your responsibility begins. How will you use this awareness from now on? Which choices would you make if you knew every experience is a creation of your own soul? What are you still postponing out of fear when life itself is calling you to expand? I invite you not to let this knowledge die within you. Apply it, reflect on it, allow your soul to speak to you in dreams, in intuitions, in silences. And whenever you wish to dive even deeper into these mysteries, I will be here with new videos, new teachings, and new keys to expansion. Therefore, subscribe to the channel right now, activate notifications, and come with me on this journey where, as you have already understood, the end does not exist. Because here, my friend, we learn what almost no one has the courage to teach.